So first I have to disclose that I am a small investor in Kickstarter, but I was just realizing that I have spent more money funding projects on Kickstarter than on Kickstarter, so I don't know exactly what that means.
I like that.
But Yancey, you're the one that decided this title for this conversation, which was governance of innovation. It seems kind of boring.
Yeah, definitely a downer title. And maybe two words you don't expect to be together. But when I think about Kickstarter in the world of hardware development, I think a lot about the combination of governance and innovation. Because the whole idea of the platform is we're allowing people to put ideas out there in the early stages of their creation and put them out at an enormous scale. So you have Oculus Rift starting on Kickstarter, you have smartwatches starting on Kickstarter, a lot of the early Internet of Things projects started on Kickstarter. We are a platform that wants to provide, just needs to have a strong reputation, a strong sense of trust within the network, that when people find a project, they are excited about it, they are looking to get involved in it. And one of the ways that you consistently do that is by trying to build a system with a strong level of trust. And that ultimately means some very smart governance, especially around new ideas. So we've made a lot of steps around hardware, some of them fairly controversial, that we can talk a little bit about today. But I think that pairing is quite important and is a big part of why Kickstarter has been so successful. I mean, it's $500 million to hardware projects to date. More than 50 projects in hardware have raised more than $1 million. That's more than every other crowdfunding site out there combined. And so that trust is a core reason why people are coming to Kickstarter in such huge numbers.
So you said, you sort of teased this already, so I'm going to ask the question. So what is one of the controversial policies, for example?
Yeah, well, we published a significant policy change in September of 2012 under the heading Kickstarter is not a store. And over the 6 months preceding that post, we were seeing $1 million projects being funded on Kickstarter very regularly. And there became this sense of Kickstarter as like this meritocratic lottery ticket. And we were also seeing, especially in the world of hardware, people coming and raising huge sums of money, but doing so at a very early stage of the process. And this made us quite nervous. We felt like there was an imbalance between the interests of backers, the interests of creators, and the platform. And so we wanted to try to correct that. And so what we did is we added a few speed bumps for hardware, but all with the long-term thought of wanting hardware projects to fulfill and have good experiences. And those things that we added were, we required every project to list risks and challenges, the things that may prevent it from being completed. We prohibited the use of photorealistic 3D renderings. We discouraged product simulations, things that didn't feel fundamentally honest or were showing how something was made. And this process began with me spending a year talking to some very experienced product designers and hardware designers, and also reading something quite old, the original FTC truth in advertising laws from like the 19-teens. I think it was the Wilson administration put those in, but just these fundamental rules that say consumers should be able to trust the things that they're seeing. And we felt like Kickstarter needed those same sorts of ideas. And when we put this out, it got 600 comments, the blog post did within a day. Most of them were quite angry. And certainly it's a decision that was negative monetarily for Kickstarter. We knew that would be the case. We were asking people to be further along in the process, and we were raising the bar for what would be on the platform. But we thought for the ecosystem of hardware development and for nascent projects, these sorts of rules made sense. And I've actually been happy to see that at most demo days now, those rules that we created that were quite controversial now seem pretty standard for how people think about this. You have to have a prototype. You have to demonstrate something. It can't just be an idea on the back of the napkin. You heard Mark Hatch say that about Tech Shop earlier. But those are policies that we instituted and sort of came up with on our own that I think were sort of negatively received at the time, but I think are quite important to creating a sustainable environment for people to put new ideas out there.
So it's interesting because in a funny way, if you were selling something like shares, you would be regulated by rules that somebody else is creating, but you're now self-governing, and the reason you're doing that is to sort of create the trust for the platform.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be there. You know, It has to be there, and especially when you are a platform that's about creating ambitious and new things, some of those things are going to fail. Like if things didn't fail, then we would be too conservative.
Right.
But so we want to enable people to do things that traditional funders and VCs are going to put their noses up at because they don't see it. But we want people to be able to share those ideas broadly with the public, but there's obviously risks with that. You know, there's certainly, you will see a lot of people accuse Kickstarter projects of being scams or those sorts of thoughts. In actuality, there are very, very few projects that don't deliver. Projects running late and behind schedule is quite common. And those two things get conflated, but I think they're quite different. I mean, if you think about a project that's running behind schedule, I don't believe it's that the creators are just like sitting around playing Xbox. I think that they are working hard on their project, but they're encountering greater obstacles that they anticipated. I mean, part of being an entrepreneur is you are very optimistic about the future, you're very optimistic about your own skills, and you almost certainly underestimate the challenges that you're going to face. And even for us starting Kickstarter, my partner Perry had the idea in 2001, and the site launched in 2009. And we were trying to launch that site the whole time, but we just kept running into these walls and had to have this perseverance to get it out there. And that's just the nature of creating something new. So I do think that we have an issue with, say, creators being too optimistic in deadlines. I think that we can help educate them more about that. I think there are issues where creators are presenting projects as being farther along than they are because they're looking to get as many backers as possible. And in the short term, that might get them more backers, but in the long term, that's probably going to lead to more challenges in making the project. So just that thought on the big picture, on the whole, on reputation, on this being a sustainable environment for innovation, that's what we see as our responsibility.
So let's take the scammers off the table.
Yeah.
I mean, I can already see a bunch of people here who are over-optimistic about their projects who aren't scammers.
Yeah, we all are. Yeah.
But telling them that they can't advertise this way makes sense. But then what are you doing to help people who maybe could deliver if they had some help, but maybe don't have it?
Yeah, I mean, we are very fortunate in that, coinciding with the rise of Kickstarter as this, incredible funding mechanism, there's also been great support networks that have come up around. People like PCH, Dragon, Tech Shop. There are a lot of young institutions that are doing, and established institutions that are doing very good work helping creators make their ideas happen. We have a part to play there as well. Something we haven't talked about publicly at all yet, but just a few weeks ago, we launched an area of Kickstarter called Campus, which is a creator-only peer-to-peer learning and mentorship area where people can share their experiences of, hey, like, when I tried to work with this one manufacturing partner, I got screwed in X or Y way, or this is a good person, you should work with them. But to try to build a scalable place where people are providing that sort of information. Because we know that there are informal groups or Facebook groups of former creators who are advising one another, helping projects that they see having a lot of promise. And we are the hub for those things. And so we've built this area that, again, is available only to creators. So if you're a Kickstarter creator, you can go and find this Kickstarter/Campus and start contributing to a communal knowledge base, mentoring younger creators, helping teach them what they should know. But that is how we're approaching this challenge. We also do have 3 quite experienced hardware designers on staff, John D'Amatos, Julio Terra, and Nick Ullman, who work hand in hand with many creators and make the sorts of connections, introduce them to Brady at Highway 1 or Liam at PCH, all these folks. And so we directly support projects much more than we talk about, but we're just trying to help these projects succeed. I mean, that's ultimately what we judge our effectiveness on. And
just historically, as a trajectory, is that increasing over time since when you first started?
Yeah, I mean, the hardware category is increasing considerably. I mean, I think $590 million has been pledged to those projects, about $230 million last year. It'll be more this year. It continues to grow. I mean, the platform overall is growing in a huge way. In March of last year, Kickstarter crossed lifetime $1 billion in pledges. We'll cross lifetime $2 billion in pledges in the fall. So like 5 years for the first billion, 18 months for the second billion, something like that. So it continues to grow. Hardware is a big reason why.
But the other sectors like arts, I remember there was some statistic that you had raised more for arts than the National Endowment for the Arts. Is that as a sector maybe, is its percentage less?
As a percentage, it's smaller, but it's also growing at a similar rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably 3 or 4x what the NEA distributes to arts projects. And interestingly, I mean, hardware gets so much attention, but it makes up only about 15% of the projects on the site. It's actually probably even less than that. But these are projects that generate huge headlines, and also, you know, a cool new connected device is going to connect much more broadly than a theater performance in, you know, in Oklahoma. Just the scales of the audiences are quite different. But when we think about the health of the platform, we think a lot about the diversity of projects. And so we put a lot of time and attention. We have people dedicated to every category, where actually we put a lot of time into encouraging modern dance projects on Kickstarter. Things that are very much unprofitable for us in the big picture sense, but are ultimately about fulfillment of the mission. And you know, we're just very steadfast in that focus.
Interesting. And I remember I was kind of frustrated because I travel a lot internationally and talk about Kickstarter, but you weren't available in countries. And I think at the time, this was a few years ago, you said it was because Amazon was a key component of your system. But how are you? You've changed recently, right?
Yeah, we changed.
What's your strategy?
Yeah, for the first 4.5 years, Amazon was powering most of the transactions happened on Kickstarter, and they were a great partner. But last year, we completely rebuilt our payments infrastructure, and this year relaunched with Stripe as the payments provider, and that's allowed us to accelerate our international expansion considerably. So in the past 6 weeks, we've launched across all of Western Europe. We launched fully localized versions of Kickstarter in French, German, and Spanish in the past 6 weeks. And now the potential creator pool has more than doubled this year. People can always back projects from around the world, and about 40% of backers come from outside of the US. So there is that audience, but for people looking to start a project, yeah, I mean, we've made huge gains this year, and we just expect that to continue.
And also, this is partially as an investor, but partially being here in sort of Silicon Valley startup fever. I've heard somewhere that you guys talked about the fact that you would never exit. Is that true? And I mean, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's true. From the very beginning, we vowed, the 3 of us as founders and our early investors, maybe that email got lost to you, but that we would never try to go public and that we would never sell. That our intention was to be a sustainable business as long as the world would have us. And so we've been a profitable company for the past 5 years, and we're like, we run our ship pretty tight, where we make more money than we spend, and we try to be very responsible. But we do think in the long term that having a space that is devoted to helping people create new things, and for that space to be completely aligned with the public interest, is what will produce the best Kickstarter. So as we think about long term, we want to continue to operate with that as our only operating focus. We're not having investors breathe down our necks or have public markets force us to make bad decisions. And we just think that's the right way to go. It's incredibly important that our employees and our shareholders see a benefit from this. And so we actually think about very traditional ways of doing that. Dividends, buybacks, things like that, like very traditional mechanisms that we think will, again, have everyone's interests aligned just on a healthy, sustainable platform. And that's just how we think about this. I mean, trying to think about building a business that lasts for the long term, it's these sorts of governance questions, whether it's ensuring that people are approaching the platform with the best opportunity for the right outcome in the end, or even thinking the governance of the company in that same sort of way. And this is incredibly important, and we keep making moves in that space. Last year, we became a certified B Corporation, so focusing that we produce a social good beyond the revenue that we generate, things like that. And we continue to look for ways that we can direct Kickstarter towards those sorts of decisions.
Well, I'm sorry this was such a short conversation. We could have gone on for a long time.
We're out of time already. Yeah.
But thank you so much, Yancey.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening. I'll be walking around today. Hope to say hi. Yeah.
All right, thank you.